in the United States, in the current administration, and the level of support you see for it at the highest level of the government, and really, you know, the courage for implementation of this difficult vision. All right, thanks.
Wyjaśnienie naszej polityki wewnętrznej. No okej, będę się starał. When Poles think of the American right, they generally think of Ronald Reagan, and they love it, with good reason. Ronald Reagan absolutely understood two big things: that communism was evil and communism would fail. And Ronald Reagan believed in democracy. He believed in the American grand strategy as I laid it out, which is not just Woodrow Wilson, it's also Teddy Roosevelt and Ronald Reagan and Harry Truman. But there is another American right that Poles do not remember, which is the American right of isolationism, of the wrong way to interpret America first. And there are people in the Trump administration who recall that bad tradition. Taka tradycja, która doprowadziła nas do 1 i 17 września 1939 roku. All right, I'm not proud of that tradition. But for that reason, I was all the more happy to hear what President Trump said at Plac Krasinskich, because he did speak of an alliance of free nations rooted in values. That is important. We can work with that and build on it. There is another vision, but I would prefer to work with what we've got. I remember in 1989, someone describing Mazowiecki's tactics as a negotiator during the Round Table, Mazowiecki and Goremek. They would be confronted with a brick wall by the communists with a tiny crack in it. And all they focused on was the crack. And pretty soon the wall disappeared. That was told to me by one of the Poles in admiration of their negotiating skills, really out-negotiating the communists. For Poland, well, Poland was a co-author of the strategy of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. It wasn't just born in Washington. Poles were influential. Lech Wałęsa's trip to the Congress and his speech that began "Mi naród," he and his team had a lot to do with it. Therefore, I suspect that the current Polish government can, and maybe they did, encourage Trump to move in a good direction. And so, if so, I applaud them. Always with the Americans, it takes some work. But Polish diplomacy at its most skillful is good at moving us in the right direction in the interests of both nations properly understood. Okay? That's the best I can do for you. Keep at it.
Mariusz Antonovich, Vilnius University, Lithuania. Do you see any role as a mediator, as someone who pressurizes for the United States in mending regional, let's say, regional tensions in Eastern Central Europe, for instance, Polish-Ukrainian or Polish-Lithuanian relations. Do you see any role that the US could play there, or is it just a bystander waiting for those countries to do their job? Thank you.
Drugie dobre pytanie, łatwe pytanie. The United States is not and cannot be some kind of imperial power. The Polish government will do what it sees in its interests. What we can do as Americans, both in government and without, is articulate the broadest possible vision. Every country, including my own, has its dark spots. You either overcome them or they eat you alive. It is important to remember what it is we set out to achieve together in 1989. And it was not a return to the 1930s, with everybody's nationalism competing with everybody else's. Look, I have nothing to say on the subject of what signs should be posted where in what language on roads and how subjects in schools should be organized. That's not our role. But if America has any role at all, it is to hold up the flame of a vision of an undivided Europe of values and of the place of all the nations in that system of values. All right, Ukraine. It's got its history and it's got its problems. And it has also got a problem. It is being attacked by Russia, which has invaded it. The most hopeful sign I have seen about Ukraine's development of its national identity has been the multinational character of the Euromaidan. And I'll tell you a story. You may remember in May 2016, the Eurovision Song Contest was won by a Ukrainian, but not just a Ukrainian, it was a Crimean Tatar, a Muslim woman, who sang about the Crimean Tatars and their suffering in the Tatar language. And she won for Ukraine, and that day on the Maidan, there was a demonstration celebrating this Ukrainian victory. And I thought to myself, I was there, I was in Kyiv, and I thought to myself, the Ukrainian national identity is beginning to crystallize in a multinational, open rather than closed nationalist form. This is good news. And that may give the Ukrainians space to deal with the darker spots of their own history the way every country has to deal with the darker spots in its history. I guess neighbors should give neighbors and friends should give friends the space to do that. Easier said than done. But the role for my government and our role for a long time, for the last generation, has been to uphold these values and then hope other countries work together. So the short answer is neither of the two extremes you posed, but we should elevate the discussion as best we can.
Thank you very much. I am Javed Veliyev from Azerbaijan. My question is about Trump foreign policy regarding the South Caucasus. We have seen that during the 19th, the Russian first policy and energy projects played a very important role for the Clinton South Caucasus policy. During the Bush administration, security, Afghanistan operation and Iran-Western relations have negative or positive effects on US South Caucasus policy. During Obama administration, democracy promotion or Turkey-Armenian relations have negative or positive relations on US South Caucasus policy. What do you evaluation about Trump South Caucasus policy in near future? Do he has any policy regarding the South Caucasus?
I think the Trump administration's policy toward this part of Europe is a work in progress. I think that his visit here was a good step forward. I'm encouraged by it. I hope we play an active role. I think that the Obama administration was not as active as it should have been in this part of the world. I think that we made a mistake of taking Europe for granted a little bit, but after the Russian invasion of Crimea and the attack on the Donbass, the Obama administration turned and changed its policy and led NATO's decision of the Warsaw NATO summit to move troops into the Baltics, Poland, and Romania. So that was late, but this time not too late. I hope the Trump administration continues the policy of building a Europe whole, free, and at peace. I think Trump's visit here was a good step in that direction. It will take a tremendous amount of effort, but it will also take efforts in countries like yours. We can't fix the issues of building a nation all by ourselves. We can do what we can do. I think the Trump administration is going to take a little while longer to get fully organized. I say this without approval, but there we are. So keep working with us and recognize, I hope you recognize that the Trump speech gave us something to work with.
Hello, my name is Mateusz Zagadłowicz. I'm a student of international relations here in Warsaw. I've read a book of George Friedman, Next 100 Years. He's a founder of Stratfor. And have you read it? And what's your thoughts about possibilities for Poland for next 100 years? Is it possible to be a power in this side of world?
I have not read the book, but, okay, is it possible for Poland to be a power? Yes. Poland had been increasing its weight in Europe. Now, I consider this to be a good thing because I think Polish views on the questions I care the most about, that is, a strong Europe, independence from Russia, a better Russia, support for an independent Ukraine are all good things. I think for Poland to realize its potential as a first-tier European country, it's got to find the balance between advancing its own national interests and doing so working through a strong Europe, which means working with Germany, working with the EU post-Brexit, working with the United States. A weak and divided European Union does nothing for anybody, as far as I can tell, except for Vladimir Putin. It helps him. Poland sometimes makes the case that Europe needs to be more responsive to middle-sized countries, to the interests of the European nations like Poland that have recently regained their sovereignty. I get that, I understand that. There's a case to be made. And Europe post-Brexit may have to enter into a period of reforms. I don't mind the notion of a Europe of nations, but weakening the European Union is not the way forward. I have found Polish diplomacy to be quite skilled. And it seems to me that a nation which understands its interest in broad terms rather than narrow terms is apt to be more successful in the end. So I hope that Poland follows the path it's been on for the past generation of realizing its perfectly legitimate national aspirations through a strong Europe and through a strong NATO and working with the United States all at the same time. Also, in my country, the Sprawa Polska, the Polish cause, has been bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans, when we put together the political coalition to get Poland into NATO, it was the Clinton administration, and we couldn't have done it without the Republicans. And when President George W. Bush wanted to bring the Baltics into NATO, he was a Republican, and we couldn't have done it without the Democrats. My one tactical advice to the Polish government would be, never make yourselves a partisan object in American domestic politics. You should be everybody's friend if they're your friend. And Poland's got plenty of friends.
Hello, my name is Georgi Sibirtsev. I'm a lecturer of Voronezh State University, Russian Federation. So I would like to ask you to clarify, you tell several words about the European values. And so I think firstly it's human rights. That's the main European values. And that's why I'm actually ask you to clarify, how do you think, what do you think about the situation with refugees in the Europe when Hungary builds a wall to protect their territory from the refugees, when Poland takes only 9,000 people of refugees and said that they don't want more, when Macron said several weeks ago about the sanctions against the Poland. So can we say that right now Central Europe has the same thoughts about the European values? Thank you.
Well, as an American, what can I possibly say about policies that are skeptical of immigration, given the position, given my country's last presidential campaign, in which the Trump campaign was extraordinarily skeptical, if not hostile, to Latino immigration. No, kim jestem, żeby krytykować innych krajów, biorąc pod uwagę polityki wobec imigrantów w moim kraju? I would say this. First of all, that's a difficult and painful issue. And it is the reaction among European countries to the hundreds of thousands of refugees was bound to be mixed, both humanitarian and sympathetic, and both concerned on security grounds and other grounds. I don't think anyone in Europe would honestly say that European Union policies toward immigration had been splendid. I think they had done the best they could under very difficult circumstances, and I just don't feel I can criticize them. I think that a successful European Union policy on immigration will have to involve elements of protection of the borders, hard security, a way of vetting people, long-term help for countries that are trying to stabilize themselves. Good luck with finding a Syria policy. It is awful and tragic. So I don't think anyone, any government would argue that they found the right answer, but it's not for me to criticize. I don't like some of the nativist politics, but that goes for my own government. Now, since you're from the Russian Federation, I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask, but I'll do it anyway. There is the view that Russia is somehow civilizationally doomed to be authoritarian, to be an autocracy and not European. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. I think Russia has gone between periods. I think the Slavophile versus Westerner divide in Russia is real, but I also think that Russia's most successful periods have been periods where it has started on the path of internal reform and modernization. And I think Russia is as capable as any other country of developing higher standards of democracy and good governance. And for that reason, I find the current Russian position to be doubly tragic, because I don't believe it's inevitable. I believe Russia could be otherwise. I think if it weren't for the Russian Revolution, Russia would have succeeded in developing itself according to European standards. I can't prove that. But I don't believe in the Sam Huntington thesis of civilizational divides. I think that's too reductionist. I think it doesn't leave enough space for actual history and for political leadership. And therefore, I believe that we should look to a better future with a Russia that is different. And I don't believe that the current Russia is the only possible Russia. You didn't ask that question, so I don't ask you to comment, but I wanted to make clear that my views of Russia's current policy are not a prognosis for Russia's inevitable future.